Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Special shout out to Jacques for coming through on Cash App very generously twice in a short time. From the bottom of my black heart, from the depth of my black mind, thank you so much, and I mean that. There's a phenomenon that's on its way out the door, thanks to you young brothers. Still extant at the moment I'm recording this, though. It's not completely out of the picture yet. Apparently, an actress named Jasmine Kashmir got married. And I'm also giving a shout out to Jacques for making me aware of this story. I don't know if it's recent or if it's a long time ago. But apparently she did. And the screenshot that I saw contained a comment of a commentator saying that this is not as strange as what we think. He couldn't do it himself, but more power to somebody who can. He got a friend that just married a former stripper that had even danced for him a few times. He was just at the wedding. At some point, this dirty movie actress named Jasmine Kashmir found God and then later found a husband. Now, the screenshot said that she was a very busy actress before she found God. So her body count must be as high as the F word, all puns intended. You can rest assured that his body count isn't like that unless he's also a reformed dirty movie actor, and even then he might not have the same count as her. So we don't know that no matter how saved she thinks she is, she doesn't want a man with less experience than her. Western women pretty much never do. And even many women from traditional areas don't want a man to be far less experienced than them. But they also don't have this view that all men or all women are the same. So they tend to take a less dirty approach to that. But the Western Nisha has the same preference, but on steroids, coupled with the notion that you can look at someone and tell everything about them just by looking. Western women can't see less experienced men as even being men, and they can't understand or respect a woman with a lot of experience picking a less experienced man and actually respecting him. She better be using such a man if she picks him, as far as the society of the hyenas are concerned, because it's war. Now, the thing is, why you young guys are out here making smarter decisions and even declining virgins if they don't know how to behave, for which they're calling you 9AY and sassy and zesty. A lot of guys my age and neighboring in age aren't doing this. There are enough guys that will marry these former strippers and 403s, or even current strippers and 403s too, while knowing that they don't have the same body counts as these women. And these are guys, they don't seem to come from your age group that often, from what I can understand, except the pro athletes or the ones that are good enough to go pro. And there's something that they have in common with guys, the average guy my age or in a neighboring age group, and that is the sheltering. See, those guys don't get to keep up with a lot of social changes because of the practice necessary to develop and maintain their skills in these athletic games. You get to keep up more. Well, anyway, that answers the question in your mind as to why. And I'm not going to tell you the answer to it so as to justify it, but just to explain it, because it does involve a mental trap. And if you don't know this trap, you fall into the same trap like the guys from my age. And then maybe the men younger than you that are still little boys now or unborn now will later fall into it, because it's a trap that's set by women themselves, requiring the cooperation of enough men. This necessary combination is already extant in our communities, though, which is how we got into this mess once. And I don't want those who cooperated to be able to get another age group into this mess after you successfully sidestepped it. So, first, know what happened to the men of your grandfather's generation, my parents' generation. They had standards and morals, but they also faced some moral standards from the women too. So they couldn't just go out and bang broads that weren't selling trim so casually. They also weren't limited to only marrying scrippers or former scrippers or women that sold trim and therefore got these really insanely high body counts. Fornication was not easily attainable for women that weren't selling it in the first place, but the fact is that they could more easily marry women that weren't ran through, or at least no one knew was ran through. And now these guys didn't like the idea. I mean, at that time, let's say those guys didn't like the idea of marrying women with bad reputations, and they didn't encourage each other to do so. But that group, that age group, the boomers I'm talking about, did believe in the double standard to an extreme. They look down on loose women because, a lock that can be opened by any keys is not really a lock. But they also look down on men who didn't fornicate that much. If you were a man that was not a master lock, they didn't look up to you. They didn't even look at you as an equal. So the seeds of an impossible and extreme double standard came about, and it made it to where guys of my age group were always threatened with being called 9AY. The prevailing attitudes towards fornication were a bit more casual among my generation. But on an individual level, these chicks in my age group became experts at passing around the same few guys so that they could get these nasty high body counts while still excluding most males. And therefore, most males had low to no body counts. And since most guys didn't know that most guys were being shut out, every guy had to have some extra anxiety about his own reputation. So the women of my age group weren't going to make it any better. See, the girls and the women of the boomers would say, what kind of girl or woman do you think I am, depending on at what age they were, whenever they were propositioned. But the ones in my age group would say, or they were imply, I wouldn't do that with you. I'd F my dog before I do you. I'd F that garbage man before I do you. They were intent on telling us in my age group, us guys, oh, anybody but you. Because they knew that it was damaging to a man's reputation and even life, even a boy's reputation or even his life, for it to get around that he was some woman's last pick, some woman's last choice. They knew that once it was known publicly that he was some girl's last choice, then it would become a matter of time before he was every other chick's last choice. They knew what they were doing. They were reinforcing this anxiety in us. Our dads did not know they were doing that. I don't know if our mothers knew, but I know mine didn't, but I'll get back to that in a little bit. But look at that scenario, what that did. So between girls on one end playing games beyond what their own moms played, and our own dads and uncles and older cousins insisting that we were either max or 9AY, the mindset was placed in our age group to be exactly what it needed to be, for women to wow the uck out exactly how they wanted to and still be able to come to a 403 retirement plan later on that was abundant because they had tricked enough of us into abundantly funding it. See, there are many guys who would still refuse among us, and usually they had enough of a reputation to lose for taking seriously a stripper or a thought. But the fact is that many guys who have no reputation for macking still believed and believe today that there's a question mark over the sexual preference itself, and that their reputations are worse than they actually are. And if they live somewhere like backwoods Louisiana or messy gossip Mississippi, well, good night. Because then there's always a question mark over them in these little towns unless they're digging out some chick and others know it. It's bad out there, folks. And of course, as you know, back when I was coming up, especially in these towns, chicks were not going to sit up here and say that anybody ever got in them guts. I mean, you could say that the captain of the football team and you were sexually active. You could say that, but somebody else, no, not really. God, no. So for my generation, it got crazy, and it still does amongst our age group. And we're now approaching 50. It's somewhat like that for your age group at times too. But by the same token, you all don't apply or bend to the same degrees of pressure that we did when it came to that. We really sucked at it. We applied a lot of pressure and we bent to very little. We really worried about a reputation for being 9AY because then 9AY dudes would approach you and women really would flee from you or friend zone you and emasculate you publicly, leading to a vicious cycle. No one would rescue you from that either. I remember my dad once asking me a question because he said, well, you know, if you had a friend, and even if he's your ex-friend, but you had a friend and it turns out that he was 9AY, your reputation is questioned once his gets out for being 9AY. Do you have any women that can say that you were with them? And I was like, Dad, of course there are women that can, but why the hell would they say that? If they have to choose between putting their reputation, ruining their own reputation to save mine, or throwing mine under the bus to save theirs, they're going to take the second option, throw mine under the bus and save their own. I was shocked because I didn't think that in his time that the girls would have done that. But then I realized my dad is from a place that's even a smaller town than where he raised me. And they were messier then. I mean, they were messier. They were shameless when I think about it. It worked out for me in the end. This ex-friend couldn't do anything to anybody's reputation. He wasn't vengeful anyway. We were done. I wasn't hanging out with him no more because he crossed boundaries with another dude that was straight. A friend of ours. And I was like, we don't do that. But the thing is that it hung over my age group. And I wasn't going to just lay down with the women that would brag about laying down with me just to avoid a false reputation. A black woman on the Gulf Coast wasn't going to confess to smashing me unless she was big or broke or ugly. And I wasn't going to lay down with them. And even then it hung out. There were times I had to pay in other ways because I wouldn't do it. But add to that, as I've stated, Western women form a sexual labor union just to limit men's options in general, and not because of chastity. That would have been okay. Hell, that could work both ways. But that they do that really just to limit options. It's nothing to do with chastity. It's just to drive up their bargaining power. So that even we have good sense to avoid such a mismatch, such as inexperienced man with a ran through woman. We don't identify it as a mismatch necessarily in my age group because the sisterhood knew what they were doing by pretending that we were all ugly or less attractive than we are. And that was to deceive us so that we would not necessarily know how bad of a mismatch these mismatches were. See, they don't need you or me to be a simp if they simply have us misinformed about our own value and about what is normal to expect from them. They successfully put into the boomers generation, and then even more so into our generation, the idea that you men have to be Superman to qualify for Lois Lane. Do you understand that? Do you get it now? And since you're going to be a normal, regular, run-of-the-mill man, you're going to get the crap treatment from many of these women, and you're going to be body number 122nd. And she's your third. And she always wants someone else that's not you. And you're going to be treated like that. And that's what you can expect. And even though they weren't trying to say that they didn't want you to know that it was every guy, because they knew that once you understood that it was every other man going through the same thing, then their gig was up. So what they had to do is they had to make you and you and you and me individually think that each one of us was doing worse than the other guys, so that we'd have too much anxiety to say anything to anybody else and compare notes. We think, oh, it's just me. No, it's just me. How come all these chicks with kids are coming after me and I ain't got no kids? Oh, it's just me. I better not say nothing. It's just something I'm doing wrong. They knew what they were doing. And in this way, since we're all in the same boat, but don't know we're all in the same boat, we all make the same mistake because we don't know that it's really a mistake. This is what deserves its own name. That type of deception there should have a name for it. And I'm still trying to think of what to call that. But it is where they deceive you into not knowing what you need to know. And then they still turn around and disrespect you as if you knew better and still did wrong, like you just some kind of knowing simp. They will disrespect you as though you meant to be a simp when in reality they successfully deceived you. And they will do whatever they can to deceive us. If we think that most women have a past like Jasmine's and that guys who stay single are 9AY, then you would also wind up thinking it's a normal match or the best match you could get, and that others aren't necessarily doing better or that you can't do better. You would think either one is just as bad. You would think this. Now, actually, I take that back. If you know that nobody's doing better and everybody else knows no one's doing better, the gig is up, as I stated. But again, the point is that if they can trick you, then that mismatch you won't even realize is a mismatch. It's an important deception for them to cast on us. This mass deception is something my own mother didn't realize for a while. She was aware of the mass silence of women in her generation, but she was not aware of the en masse deception in which they engage in both your age groups and mine. Well, she was not aware when I was a kid. She kind of became aware by 2000, and she didn't really know how to describe it. So at times it gets to be even worse than what some women who mean well could prepare their sons for. Now, there were also women of my mother's age group that were much lower class than my mother, and they were in on it. They gave my age group of women the game. They knew what it was, but they weren't going to tell on themselves. But the point I'm making is that I want you to know what the mindset was. And then this way, you will understand that while you were sidestepping that same mental trap, you must also reach out to them even younger brothers of yours that are too young to have their own YouTube accounts, too young to have their own Facebook accounts, Instagram and Snapchat, technically or legally too young. You got to reach them. Austin's got to reach Major's age group and tell them these things. Now, Simba, my son, ain't got no younger brothers, but his friends may have younger brothers, and they got to reach their younger brothers and tell them what these things are about, that this is not just something that you're not paranoid or overthinking it when you notice these patterns. These patterns are real, and they hope that you think you're overthinking so that you don't discuss these things with each other the way they discuss you with each other in the hair salons, and then you're not up on the game. They spend a lot of their time talking about how to deceive, how to manipulate, how to trick, how to underinform, how to misinform, and how to even sometimes properly inform us. They spend a lot of time talking about these things so that they can get resources without working, and so that they can F the guy who doesn't have the resources but has the DNA they want and breed his kids at the rest of our expense. They'd sit up and discuss this stuff, and we sitting up thinking, if you discuss women enough, even though you have a reason to, just to know what their plans are, you wrong, something wrong with you, forget about all that. No. If PJ Washington had been given the game before he was as good as he became at basketball, do you think Brittany could have pulled that on him? I'm telling you, it's not a coincidence. And they want you to think that you are imagining this. They want you to not discuss this. So if a man says you're only discussing women as a problem, okay, fine. But if a man sits up and says that you need to not discuss them, that's an issue. If he says you need to under discuss them, that's an issue, because you discuss things that you don't know about, but you don't know enough. Or somebody else with whom you're discussing it doesn't know enough. Someone doesn't know enough. That's why you discuss it. We don't know enough about them. So I'm sitting up here discussing it. I know education. Some of you guys know business. Some of you guys know coding. I know languages. I mean, in general, some of you guys know physics. Some of you guys know differential algebra or whatever they call it. Some of you guys know Chinese calculus. I'm making these things up. But the point is, we men are allowed to learn about everything that is a skill that involves labor, but we're not allowed to learn about the one part of life that always seeks to take advantage of our skill to get the resources without bringing skills of their own. And look what it's done. What does it lead to? You got a man sitting up here thinking that in order to be a real man, he got to marry Jasmine Kashmir. Not realizing that if she was not Jasmine Kashmir, if she had not done what she did before she found God, she wouldn't be with him. Nobody pulled this man aside and told him. And if they did, he was already thoroughly brainwashed by the time someone did pull him off to the side. And he thought it sounded like a persecution complex, a type of paranoia. He doesn't have to have low self-esteem to take a deal like that if he's already been taught that to simply be aware enough and to think that that's why the deal is being offered to you, you got to have low self-esteem. If he's already been brainwashed to think that thinking in depth about it enough is paranoia and low self-esteem, then he won't think about it. And so he walks right the F into the trap. That's the game. That's what it is. There you go, gentlemen. This is why it is that men who have made smart decisions about everything else in life have made decisions like this, coming out of my age group and the neighboring ones. This is why I made the mistake of marrying, one of the times I married wrong. I mean, she wasn't no Jasmine Kashmir, of course, but what I'm saying is that there have been times when I have chosen wrong because I was not given low self-esteem successfully, but I was legitimately deceived into thinking that all other options were just worse, because they were. I wasn't even deceived into thinking that. I was deceived into thinking that looking for better options was not even realistic. I was deceived into not knowing how bad the options, the average really was. And I wasn't the only one. You tell them younger brothers that are boys right now what it is, and there won't be another crop of victims. You sidestep this as a majority. I mean, you young guys have sidestepped this. Those of you in your 20s, maybe early 30s, y'all sidestepped this successfully, and I'm glad you did. You guys have made me proud in a lot of ways and a lot of times. And sometimes middle-aged guys and older guys are also making me proud with some of their reactions, as I stated in my last 2 uploads. But if you play this right, you can make sure that these younger brothers that are still minors are not subjected to the same mind games. I hope that what I've said helps and benefits. Thank you for listening. As always, black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual non-select male power because they don't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction of Judgment Day. Thank you again, S. Jacques, for putting me on to this and for the Cash App donation. And I want to thank M. Mebane and C. Peterson for coming through on Cash App before that. Thanks for flying with us on Jet Black Airways, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. And I invite you to go to buymeacoffee.com/jet.black. Link is in the description. to either get into the business class or the first class, even better yet, and get access to more of the content that is coming out, such as the beginning of the storage of Confessions that's already out, and some other insight into living abroad in general and living here specifically. Keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.